TwinBee is a shooter that a lot of US audiences may not be familiar with, and this series has been released on numerous platforms but almost never outside of Japan. However, they did try to give this series a chance one time in the US. What happened? What's going on, guys? It's Pojer coming at you with another video. Alright, so we're going to be talking about the TwinBee games. So if you've seen a few of my videos and you like what I do, feel free to hit that subscribe button right there. It only takes a second, but it helps me out tremendously. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If everybody watching this video hits that subscribe button, I would hit it tonight. And don't forget, my Discord community is looking pretty good right now. Just go to discord.pojer.net or just click on the link in the description. Alright, let's talk about TwinBee. When you think of shooters, usually a sci-fi type of game comes to mind. The setting is always in space, and the tone is usually dark and serious, but in 1985, Konami came up with a very unique idea. They released TwinBee in arcades. This game definitely stands out from the crowd. The graphics are way more bright, colorful, and cartoony. This cutesy style of game was mainly attractive for Japanese consumers, which is why this may not have been released in the US. But due to the popularity, TwinBee was ported over to the Famicom. So we can tell right away this is an early release. Konami is still using their old logo, and the graphic style is very primitive, which is normal for an early Konami game. But it's still very colorful and cutesy like the arcade version. So it's a vertical shooter that has power-ups that you can collect. It's similar to Xevious by Namco, where you can shoot missiles on land, and like Xevious, you have to aim just right or you'll miss. The power-up system is unlike any other game I've played. You shoot bells from clouds, and when they change color, they represent a specific power-up. You're supposed to keep the bell in the air as long as possible until it cycles to the power-up that you want. Sometimes you might miss the power-up, whether it's because it falls off screen or it cycles past the color that you wanted. The bell system is actually kinda interesting because it conditions the player to not shoot despite there being enemies on the screen. So while the bell provides great upgrades for your ship, they also make the game more difficult in some cases. There's a few power-ups that are beneficial. The blue bell gives you extra speed, which is important because you start off very slow. The red bell gives you the shield ability, which allows you to take some hits before dying. The flashing bell gives you 2 extra options that provide extra firepower. One of the best upgrades isn't even found in the bells at all. By shooting the enemies on land, some will give you the spread gun. Pairing the spread gun with the shield ability will ensure that you'll make it further in the game. So this is a very unique title with a very cool weapon upgrade system and fun gameplay, but it's not perfect. I don't like that some of the weapons are not stackable. The game doesn't allow you to pair the shield upgrade or spread gun with the option ability, and while the game is certainly not easy, once your ship is fully powered up, you can make it through without too many issues. You can easily destroy the bosses before they have a chance to do anything. There's also not a lot of varieties in the levels. They all look the same, and there's not that many levels in the game in general, only 6 total. And there's no ending either, it just brings you back to stage 1. But despite the minor setbacks, they came up with a really cool concept here, and what we get is a very fun title. So let's talk about the release of this game for a second. Because the graphic style is very Japanese-like, this may have been why TwinBee was never released outside of Japan. They probably realized the US audience won't appreciate this type of game. But when Konami began working on a sequel, they made a very interesting decision. About 10 months after the release of the first game, Konami published a sequel on the Famicom Disk System. But in a surprising twist, they decided to give this game a chance in the US, making this the only TwinBee game ever released here, not counting re-releases like Virtual Console. However, it didn't get the TwinBee name, instead they called it Stinger. When you start the game, you get a cutscene of the premise, and this leads to my first problem. This cutscene is completely unskippable, so every time you reset the game, you have to watch this. I generally reset a lot when I play shooters, so this is extremely annoying. Like seriously, I don't care. I don't want to watch this again. So they made a really big change to the gameplay. Now there's horizontal stages with the same concept. You shoot the bells and you're still able to throw missiles onto land. While this is a cool twist on the gameplay, it's really difficult to aim your shots correctly, and because of the graphic style they chose for this game, a lot of the things blend in and it's hard to see what you're doing. I'm not a big fan of these stages, but thankfully the vertical stages are still here and they're still mostly great. Your ship has a slightly different design from the first game. I'm not sure why they made this change. And the bells are a lot heavier in this game too. They fall much more quickly and they're harder to juggle. Therefore, it's much more difficult to obtain the weapon upgrades that you want. When you die in this game, you actually have the opportunity to regain all your previous power-ups if you collect the ghost sprite. In the first game, you had to start from scratch when you died, so this is a nice mechanic. They made some changes to the power-ups, some good and some bad. The bells now give you the laser ability, which is one of the best weapons. Thankfully, this game lets you stack certain power-ups that you couldn't before. You can now use the option ability with the shield upgrade, which is a big improvement over the first game, but you still can't use the option ability with the spread gun. Speaking of the spread gun, they actually added a second one that gives you 5 bullets instead of 3. You would think the 5 spread gun will be better since it has more coverage, but you can only shoot one at a time, so you actually don't get a lot of firepower out of it. There's new power-ups that are indicated by letters. These give you projectiles that shoot either left, right, or below depending on what letter you grab. These might seem like a useful upgrade, but they actually take away from your existing firepower, and therefore they're not worth it. But here's the problem, they're easy to grab on accident, and once you do, there's no way to discard it unless you die. What a stupid change. Like with the first game, you can tell by the graphic style that it's a very early release. Konami hasn't quite perfected the NES yet, which is fine for 1986. Speaking of graphics, I do gotta give some credit because the stages do have a lot more variety than the first game. Here, they actually redesigned each stage to look completely different from one another, and I really like that. Unfortunately, most of the bosses are pretty lousy. You can wipe them out before they even have a chance to move. It's worse than the first game, honestly. Even when you're not fully powered up, you can still take them out easily. What happened here? Overall, this game is a lot more complicated than the first one. They tried to spice it up with new mechanics and upgrades, but a lot of them are not good. I really don't like the horizontal stages, and the letter upgrades really need to go. But some of the changes are welcome. It's longer than the first game, the laser power-up is nice, the graphics have more variety, and you can stack certain weapons now that you couldn't before, so it's a mixed bag. Judging by the fact that the US never received a TwinBee game ever again, I assume Stinger didn't perform very well here. So with that said, while Konami was certainly done making TwinBee games in the States, they made one more for the Famicom. Alright, let's look at the final game of the TwinBee series, at least on the NES. So we can tell already that the graphics look much better. The first two games looked very primitive, but here the graphics are more colorful and each stage looks drastically different from one another. This game was released late in the Famicom's lifespan, so at this point Konami was learning new tricks. They cut some of the stupid features that were in the previous game. There's no more of those letter power-ups, thank God for that. They also got rid of the horizontal stages, so it's more like the first game. They also removed the 5 spread gun, which was not a super great weapon in Stinger. So we're seeing Konami clean up the game a little bit, which is good. Speaking of weapons, you can finally stack your upgrades the way you want, even the option ability with the spread gun, which you couldn't do in the other games, so that's a big improvement. They also fixed the bosses. They addressed the biggest issue of the previous games, and now they're impossible to defeat quickly no matter how hard you try. Most of them either have multiple forms or utilize a hit and run strategy, which makes them impossible to speed through. This is a huge improvement over the last two games. I gotta give some credit to the music. In the first two games, the same song played for every stage, but here we get a different track for each level, so finally we get some variety. And the music is fantastic, by the way. So they definitely made some improvements here, but there's still some things I don't like. My first complaint is that the frame rate is poor and it feels really choppy because of it. This is actually going backwards because the first two games didn't have any frame rate issues. They definitely put a lot of detail in this game, and that could be why it doesn't run as smoothly. My second issue is that the game is extremely short, only 5 levels. That's even worse than the first one. Why such little content? Overall, they made a lot of improvements in this one. The stages have more variety, they removed all the pointless features from the last game, the bosses are much improved, and the graphics and music are way better. But the frame rate is poor and the game is way too short. But all things considered, this is still a fantastic game. If I had to rank the trilogy from best to worst, I do think TwinBee 3 is the best, the original TwinBee is the second best, and Stinger is the worst. The original game is great, but the third one improved on it a lot. Stinger was ambitious, but it tried too many things that even the developers realized were bad. I think they should have released the first game or the third game in the US, not Stinger. Had they done so, we might be looking at a different situation. Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button for more content. Both of these things really help the channel grow. If you have anything to share, feel free to leave a comment. I read every single comment on this channel, and I'm pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one.